Muchas gracias, José Luis. Espero que hayáis tomado buena nota. Yo, desde luego, lo he hecho. Y como ha comentado antes nuestro presidente Ernesto, Jaco Huisman hoy tenía un compromiso en Bruselas y no nos puede acompañar, pero nos ha enviado este vídeo que voy a proyectar ahora.
Good morning, greetings from Brussels. This is Jaco Huisman from DG Environment, and I will introduce you a bit to the upcoming and the forthcoming EOV regulation. Unfortunately, this is an online recording. It was not possible resource-wise to come over to Madrid, and I regret it because on one hand the summer already ended here, so we have rain showers and cold weather now. And of course, you had a very interesting lineup with both the Pope and Bad Bunny visiting Madrid in these weeks. But yeah, such a lineup goes way beyond my pay grade, so we have to stick with the online contribution only for now. But let's go to the content. What I will do is show you a little bit, introduce to you the latest in the final stages before the end-of-life vehicle regulation text will be officially adopted in the near future. As you know, there have been negotiations until the end of December on the text between the Council and the Parliament, and this text was published in the end of February. And after that, there is this stage of loyal linguistic checks to really make sure everything is in the right place and with the right numbering, etc. for you. But it also means that this text is very imminent, and I'll highlight a little bit for you what has been done so far. So the endorsement of the provisional text agreed upon was done on 25th of February, where quite a big majority of the member states on one side, but also in the Parliament, and most of the political groups or the constructive political groups voted in favor of the agreed text between the co-legislators. After this, there's still some work done, so this loyal linguistic checks. So here's the overall timeline, and we are now expecting that the Parliament is going to vote in the plenary session, as we call it, on the final end-of-life vehicle regulation text in the second week of June, probably around June 16. And after that, the timeline is a little bit uncertain, but we hope the text will still be published in the course of July. And it may enter into force either somewhere in mid-August or at the beginning of October, because there's a holiday period in between. But it's very imminent. And what is very important as well, after the entry into force, which is typically 20 days after the publication in the official journal, there will be 24 months for this to enter into application, where let's say quite a chunk of the main and the new requirements will start to apply in all of the member states. If I go to the main objectives behind the end-of-life vehicle regulation, you can actually summarize it in one rather simple slide with 6 objectives, for which the top 3 ones are mainly trying to improve the demand side for raw materials, but also for spare parts and components. And the bottom ones are mainly related to improve the supply of secondary raw materials, spare parts, by improving collection, by improving treatment, but also to improve the cooperation and the governance of the systems and the PROs and the EPR systems. If you look at a little bit back at the overall negotiation process, from a Commission's point of view, we're quite happy that most of the main structure and most of the ambition level has been kept intact as it is in the proposal that was already launched in July 2023. But in some cases there is more ambition, so the scope part, for instance, is increased in ambition. In the information and design requirements, there has been a bit of streamlining and to reduce also administrative burden in light of all the discussions about simplification. The targets for plastics have been lowered a little bit, but on the other side, for the metal side, the timelines for steel and aluminium recycled content have been advanced. On the supply side as well, most of the originally proposed export and collection provisions are remained intact, but there have been quite some changes, for instance, in the EPR section, and also much more ambition in the treatment side, most notably for the treatment requirements that have been beefed up in the Annex 7, which will become the Annex 8 when the final text comes out. The complex slide here is about the scope. This Article 2 is maybe not the easiest one to read, but you have seen, of course, that there is a scope extension to the L category vehicles, the motorcycles, as well as the trucks and buses and the trailers more on the heavy duty side of things. And there have been a lot of, let's say, exemptions also in scope. So small series production is not in there, armed services not, vehicles of historic interest. There will be a new annex on vehicles of special cultural interest, which will become Annex 2 in the latest numbering, as well as some additional, let's say, extensions. On the treatments and the collection side and EPR, most of the provisions of the UV regulation will start to apply to the extended scope, with one noticeable difference. That is, for the export, the motorcycles will not be falling under the export regime of only exporting roadworthy vehicles. To go to the boring slide, on the, of course, a new regulation, or actually a regulation that is replacing a 25-year-old directive, means a lot of polishing up and new definitions as well in the Article 3. A key one is the definition of an EOV versus used vehicle. Here the Council had let's say, a much more elaborate approach, which was, let's say, a bit countered by the Parliament based on concerns about property rights and so on. So what you will see is that the new Annex 1 is tuned down a little bit from the Council general approach, but there's still very clear definitions on what constitutes an end-of-life vehicle or used vehicle. But to dive into the first main objective, or the main area of changes, that is to design more circular. Here there are design for removal requirements in the Article 7. And here, it's quite important to note that also the work on this by the Joint Research Center has already started, in particular focusing on the EV batteries and the e-drive motors. Then there are various information requirements, which I already said have been streamlined a bit, but there are very important things, of course, also in the Article 11 to not only make the information available, but also to digitalize and to streamline the provision of information, and also to limit the coding of parts and software updates when they are hindering repair, reuse, or remanufacturing, for instance. So let's say the ambition there has retained quite a bit. On recycled content, without a doubt, this is the most debated section, basically, in particular on the plastics. The ambition level is a bit lowered compared to the original Commission proposal, but yeah, that was to be expected with both Council and Parliament having a lower ambition level here at stake, also related to concerns about the availability of plastics. Still, the 25% target in 10 years from now has retained, as well as the closed loop percentage. And we also think it's absolutely right to also focus only on the post-consumer plastics, because in our view, that's where the market failure is. On the flip side, more ambition is shown for setting recycled content targets for steel and aluminium. This is in line with the Steel and Metals Action Plan, where feasibility studies have been announced to follow within 1 year after entry into force of the regulation, and the calculation methods will follow in 2 years, and the targets will be set no later than 7 years from the entry into force. And there's alignment also in time with the upcoming quality requirements, so to make sure that supply and demand are trying to meet each other in the long-term future to get out of the chicken and egg problems on having recycled content in new vehicles. There will be some implementation challenges, maybe. The timelines for setting these targets are quite fast. If I go to extended producer responsibility, there are a few novelties here in the ELV regulation. First of all, waste management operators will be granted an observer status in the producer responsibility organizations. The objective behind that is mainly to foster better dialogue and cooperation. There's also this cross-border EPR mechanism, and the principle there basically is that if there's no producer or importer that can be identified in the country, then basically the manufacturer is responsible. So effectively it means that there's a rollback mechanism to the brand of the vehicle to cover the cost for all end-of-life vehicles that are collected and treated in every country. So to ensure that there's financial coverage for all of them. The manufacturers can do this either via an authorized representative or also assign the producer responsibility organization to take on that role for them. And then, of course, there will be quite some discussions about the cost coverage and on Article 20. There's also work for the member states to monitor that and to kind of mediate between the producers and the recyclers in setting which cost levels need to be covered by the producers in the end. But I'm sure we'll have plenty of discussions on that topic in the implementation stages later. Then on collection and export, as I said before, we're quite happy that the original setup is mainly retained. That will mean that vehicles that are not roadworthy cannot be exported anymore. There will be a lot of work together with the colleagues from DG Move and from Taxud, from the customs officials, to make this a fully automated, let's say, digital procedure, where the PTI status of the vehicle can be checked at the moment that the export declarations are filled in and lodged. And the idea is also there to avoid that vehicles are arriving at the port. So the measures will hopefully filter out a lot of these vehicles that do not have the quality to be shipped anymore, and to prevent a lot of the illegal export and of low quality vehicles and of end-of-life vehicles in this respect. The only significant change that is made that Parliament wanted to have more time also for the exporters and for the car dealers here. So instead of 4 years before the entire system becomes operational, as in the Commission minimum timeline, this has been extended to 5 years. On treatment, there has been significant rebalancing by the Council, as you have seen, between the removal requirements and the quality requirements for aluminium steel and the use also of post-shredder technologies when it comes to finding also economic and environmental optimum situations. So also the mixed shredding and landfill restrictions are made conditional towards these quality requirements, and this basically allows member states and the systems to choose between going a much more manual way or a more automated disassembly way versus trying to adhere to the quality requirements after applying post-shredder technologies and also allowing for investments in that direction in the future. There's quite a bit of modernization here. I think it's also important to highlight that the requirements for parts that are fit for reuse and remanufacturing, when they meet certain labeling and other quality requirements, that they will be kept out of the waste status to promote also the availability of refurbished or remanufactured spare parts in the future. Then on monitoring, inspection and enforcement, well, you know quite well, enforcement is always been an issue, in particular in this sector. So we are quite pleased with the legislative text in that respect. Despite the many discussions on simplification, at least the current reporting requirements are largely kept as in the Commission proposal. And also the minimum inspection levels for the member states are there. And I think it's also a good development that the inspection levels are also mainly to be targeted on the more illegal or gray area of these of the market. So starting to wrap up, this slide is also boring, but there's a lot of closing provisions. Have a look at it. You can also read it from the text. I think what is important for you as well in what is coming, the regulation will enter into force 20 days after publication in the official journal, and it will become applicable, as I said at the very beginning, also about 2 years after the entry into force. Now, as a final one for you, what's next? At least what's next for us is a lot of work on implementing and delegated acts, what we call secondary legislation. We expect to have work on about 12 of them, which are mentioned in the text. And you can see in this slide also the timelines for this. A lot of work, in particular on the top level, has already started. So on the plastic recycled content, but also on the steel and aluminium recycled content targets and the calculation methodologies. The JRC is already active, and let's say first results will also be shared with stakeholders very soon. That is it for now. Unfortunately, I couldn't be with you for the event. I hope you extend the invite maybe again to next year. And I would love to come to Madrid and also to see you in person next year. So with that, I will thank you. If you have any further questions, we have limited availability, but at least you can email the addresses mentioned on the slide, and we are making, of course, a very good collection on all of the legal interpretation and other practical implementation ones for you in the near future. And I hope I can be with you maybe next year to really discuss the actual implementation of this new and hopefully, and from our view, very well balanced new end-of-life vehicles regulation. I hope you have a good, nice rest of the conference and many fruitful discussions among yourselves, and hope to see you next year. Thank you very much.